You gotta watch out for them Flyboys.
Okay, real talk. How much cocaine did you two snort before we got onto this podcast?
Just a little happy juice, buddy.
For legal reasons, I am required to say none.
What is cane? Why does it have coke?
My parole officer asked me to not answer questions like that anymore.
Understood.
I won't answer anything without my lawyer present.
Right.
An award for most out-of-pocket beginning of a podcast episode goes to this one.
This one. Welcome back, boys and girls.
I heard a great opening to a podcast where one person said, "How are you doing?" And then the other one said, "I'm not great. I have an STD." And they were like, "What?"
That's how they started it?
A Samuel transmitted disease?
That's how.
Oh.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. I'm celibate.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, that was like the beginning of the podcast. Oh my god, I gotta send that to you guys after this.
All right.
For sure.
All right. We're off topic, boys.
Already.
We looked like we got into a little bit of James Franco's stash before we even started here.
Great start.
All right. As you can probably tell by the third voice, we have a guest again. And as you probably know, the man that brought us our most popular episode of season 2,
Really?
Mr. Samuel, is back in the studio once again. Welcome back. Round of applause.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be back.
About
Yep.
to record the least popular episode of season 3.
Oh, come on, dude.
No, I think we can get some.
I could pull better than that. Come on, dude.
We can get some good content out of it. Is it a well-known movie? No. Speaking of which, Kyle, what the heck are we talking about this week?
Well, we're talking about the movie.
So you wouldn't do it for the intro, but you'll do it on your own.
The movie.
as it's pronounced in James Franco English, Flyboys.
Flyboys. I feel like it should have its own theme song. It definitely could.
Fly boys, fly.
Yeah. Trumpets everywhere.
Samuel found a triplane.
Now,
Gosh dang
dear listener, I'm holding a little metal model triplane in my hands.
There you go. This is why we need to be a video podcast.
Whenever
season,
we become a video podcast, we can re-record this, and I'll go meow.
there
For
you
those
go.
of you who are curious, we're recording on a Friday night, and this is how we are spending our Friday night.
Let's do it. This is a great way to spend a Friday night.
Oh yeah,
Just
totally.
three guys
Nothing
talking
better.
about a movie nobody else remembers.
Making airplane noises alone in their various rooms.
Well, okay. So if nobody remembers it, Dustin, tell us what's this movie's deal?
What's this
What do we
movie's
do?
deal is it was
Yeah.
released in 2006. It's sitting at a 33% from critics,
Ouch!
which I will admit is too low.
It is too low. I mean, like, it's not that bad of a movie, guys.
66% from audience.
Okay, that's
That's
A little
yeah.
high.
Yeah, that's
We should really be in like the 48 critic, 62 audience
Yeah.
range, you know, like
6.5 on IMDb. Come on, if you're below a 7 on IMDb, what are you doing? Though I do believe 10,000 BC was below a 6. So
I think it was a 5.8.
I think so,
remember right.
yeah, which is essentially a 0.
all
All right.
Which is why half of that episode doesn't even really talk about the
We
movie
don't even-
2000 BC.
I
We had
forgot
to
what
move
movie we
on
were
to
talking
save
about
the
halfway
content.
$60 million budget. Samuel, you want to guess how much money this movie made? $60 million budget.
I feel like I'm gonna guess 90 million.
Okay, so you think it broke even and
Yeah.
and made 50% more? Kyle,
I mean,
what do you think?
I'm sure they lost some on like the advertisement. Or
I'm
whatever.
going to guess it made $25 million.
Oof.
Kyle is much closer. Made $17.8 million.
Oh, what?
This movie lost $42 million.
Oh,
Oh my
no.
god,
You know what's
that's
funny?
so bad.
A studio would not back this. It was basically funded privately.
Well,
Wait,
those
okay.
are some multimillionaires who don't have multimillions anymore.
Those are some people who hate James Franco.
Hmm.
All
Would have
right.
been better off to just fund the room, guys. At least you,
You
knew
should
that
have.
was going to fail.
I think
Direct-
what we learned there is that I have no idea like how much movies make or like
No,
or anything like
that's not a bad guess. I mean, in all honesty, because it's not a big blockbuster, but you're like, okay, I mean, James Franco, 2006. It's about a fairly untold story. It's not like a niche audience that would go see this.
Planes go boom, like
Why? Yeah, no, yeah, 17.8 million, guys.
ouch.
I think that 33% really didn't do him any favors.
no.
Directed by Tony Bill. You guys know Tony Bill?
No.
Nobody does. Director, he's made a bunch of TV movies and single episodes of shows. Also has not directed a theatrical release since this movie. Okay.
It's almost like he lost $40 million.
It's also almost like it's
Wow.
kind of weird that James Franco started directing around 2005 with these little artsy films. And then in 2006, you have this no-name director, and he's the star. Little
crazy.
Kurt Russell tombstone going on here.
Yeah, the problem is Kurt Russell could direct.
I mean, James Franco went on to direct some. I mean, he's directed movies. I don't know any of them, but
Let me
he's
clarify.
directed them.
Kurt Russell could direct action movies.
That's fair. Written by three guys, one of which is David S. Ward, who wrote 1973's The Sting, Major League, and Kyle's favorite Tom Hanks movie, Sleepless in Seattle. Fun fact.
You could have said any Tom Hanks movie, and I would have believed it.
Dude, I love Tom Hanks. He's America's dad.
James Franco earned his pilot's license in preparation for this film.
And then it was revoked.
Somehow still not the highest he's been on set.
Hey.
So like I said, no studio would back this film. So producer of The Patriot, Dean Devlin, this guy keeps coming up. I don't know what's happening with our podcast. David Ellison, who plays Beagle, and is the son of the 12th richest man in the world at the time that this movie was made, Larry Ellison, which was essentially second in line to Steve Jobs. Legitimately, like in Apple, was going to take over, and then Steve Jobs took over instead.
Wow.
I've never watched a Steve Jobs movie, but I'm sure he's a character. All right, let's break down our cast here, guys. James Franco, Blaine Rawlings. Blaine Rawlings, not a real person?
No, not a real person.
I don't think any of these people are real people.
All right, that's fair.
A few are. We'll get to it.
Oh,
all right.
Okay.
Actually, I think one is just
man.
one.
He's also Blaine Rollins from Texas, who's in France for 30 seconds, and then he sounds like this because James Franco can't speak in an accent for more than 30 seconds.
He is Keanu Reeves and Dracula in this movie. It's
Except
about
worse
two
because it
lines,
doesn't come back, right?
and then
Like
it's
Keanu
gone.
keeps trying to bring his English accent
I
back.
think that makes it
and
worse. I would rather you just act like the
That's
first
fair.
two lines didn't have an accent.
I'd
than-
rather you just Kevin Costner it in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves and not give me an accent at all.
That would
And
also work
just,
fine.
Just feel like I can't do it. Sorry,
This
they
is
should
how I
have hired
talk.
somebody else.
Or like Hunt for Red October, where they like speak in Russian for like 2 sentences, and then they're just like English now.
Yes. And then Sean Connery's like capitalist pig dog.
Anyways, enough of that nonsense. Let's get to some English here, which is also funny because our French girl speaks English like ridiculously fast.
She learns quick, man.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I would have rather seen James Franco try to talk in French on camera. I'm just saying. I would have rather them gone the other way. Like he's picking up French really fast, but oh well, you can't have everything. I'm gonna say this wrong. Jean Reno. He's Captain Thinault, and he is Ponton in Pink Panther. That's what I know him from. He's in a lot of stuff, man. But I was like, he's the Watson character in Pink Panther. It's like that's the first thing I thought of.
He's kind of like a Gerard Depardieu, where he's that French guy that you're like, I know that guy. I don't
Yeah,
know his name, but I know that guy.
That guy looks really French.
You're hired.
I think he's actually Spanish.
Oh,
Yeah.
and then we have Jennifer Decker. She plays Lucine, and I know it's Lucien, but or however he says it. I don't care. It's Lucine.
Lucine in the sky with
Exactly.
Let's just call her Lucy. Yeah.
Lucy. Abdul Salas. He plays Eugene Skinner. I don't have much on him. He was in a couple other things. Tyler Labine plays Briggs. He's Dale in Tucker and Dale versus Evil. I will bring that up. I'll bring that movie up as many times as I possibly can. This is at least the third or fourth time. Martin Henderson plays Reed Cassidy. He's the guy from The Ring. Also, he's the guy that plays Britney Spears' boyfriend in the music video for Toxic.
Whoa.
So,
why didn't you start with his big title? I mean, come on.
Yeah. You didn't think I went that far down IMDb, did you? They did yet. All right, boys, let's get into this movie.
Let's do it.
Let's fly over this movie.
Yeah.
By the start of 1916, World War I had wreaked havoc on Europe.
Dramatic
With
music.
Yes. Thanks for just saying dramatic music instead of like humming something dramatic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. With it brings the first generation of fighter pilots. People watch updates on the war in a small theater. Can we expand on how this is prevalent in America during this time? So I think this is a fascinating part of history. Like, you didn't have a TV in your television, or you didn't have a television in your living room. You just go down to the theater and watch some propaganda films.
Yeah, as my first act as guest on this podcast, I'm going to hand it over to Kyle. Kyle, what you got on
Cool.
this?
Thanks.
Very nice. Very nice. I'd like to pass.
Yeah. So this is a thing that occurs in the United States, especially in the early 20th century, for exactly the reason that you just said. It's just that you don't have TVs. So mass media in terms of news is newspapers, slowly becoming radio, or narrated silent films.
I like that the guy who's reading it in this narrator voice definitely doesn't look like the narrator type. He's like a high school kid with this very deep, like, I'm talking dramatically. You are listening to my words. And he's like, looks like he's about to go play football for the Central Bulldogs right afterwards.
Now, here's the thing about what we see in Flyboys is that I'm not going to say that it never happened at all. I am going to say that it's 1916 and filming something in general is not an easy task. And so really it's newspaper headlines. Like they took a World War II thing, like something that happened during World War II. They kind of like 1916'd it, put it in the movie, and went, that probably happened. That's probably fine.
Good enough.
And it certainly would not happen in a very small town in Texas. Is kind of the key there. I'm sure New York, Boston,
Like
Chicago.
if it had a movie theater, like
because again, it's 1916, and that's the weird thing about the Americans in this movie is it seems like they kind of took a 1940 America and 1940 American characters and just stuck them into a World War I movie where everything else was very clearly like the 19 teens. And they were like, all right, this is fine.
We don't have a World War II budget, so we'll do a World War I movie. But
Because
we're also
even
going to kind
the-
of do a World War II movie.
Even the ranch foreclosure, which we'll get to here momentarily, it's not that like you didn't foreclose on ranches throughout history, but that is an image that just evokes like Great Depression, World War II. And even the way that it's so again, it's this really, really strange. We're in 1939 America until we arrive in the train station in France, and then suddenly it's 1916.
Right. So a golden opportunity presents itself to young Franco. A get out of jail free card by way of going to fight with the French. So this, oh my gosh, Lafayette Escadrille?
The Lafayette Escadrille, yes.
Escadrille?
yeah,
That was
pretty
okay.
good.
That was,
Yeah, so,
hey, look
I mean,
at me go.
Yeah. So
You
Lafayette.
couldn't pronounce Dermot Mulroney for Young Guns, but you could pronounce Lafayette Escadrille.
I was pretty close.
Yeah, Lafayette referring to, the French nobleman who came over during the Revolutionary War, and then escadrille if you're being really French, but escadrille if you're being English.
American.
So yeah,
Franco.
escadrille means squadron. So they're like the Lafayette Squadron.
Very neat. Okay. All right.
Sorry.
So that's who he's going to be joining up with, and he's not going to be the only one. Number 4 ranked boxer decides to also join in the flying airplanes in the war. This is based on a real person. I don't want to dig into your guys' stuff, but I was reading about this. Former boxer and son of a slave, both parts of his character, for some reason had his name changed in the movie. Skinner, which is the only thing he's called throughout the entire movie, not really part of his name. And I was thinking to myself, you have the only black guy in the movie, essentially, and you name him Skinner.
Oh, dang.
Interesting choice.
Nice, guys.
All right. Also, in real life, this guy, real name Eugene, did not serve in this specific, I guess, branch, as he was rejected by a prejudiced white man, which I think there were a few of them around in 1916.
Just a handful.
Just a couple.
Just a couple. Moving on. Love that there's no subtitles when we start speaking French because they don't understand what they're saying. I like when they do that. I thought that was something unique to Inglourious Bastards whenever she doesn't speak German and the two guys are speaking German. Apparently, Flyboys did it first. So you take that, Tarantino. From, I forgot his name already, Tony Bill. Anyways, so also love that as he speaks of the bravery, a plane burns and plummets towards the ground behind him. He mentions to these guys life expectancy 3 to 6 weeks for pilots. Any confirmation to this? And what's killing them? Is this enemies shooting them down? Is this accidents in the field? What's killing our boys here?
Okay, let's go with a little more context first. Okay, so all right. So the Lafayette Escadrille, it's not going to be called that until later, but it's basically an all-American like squadron of fighter pilots serving under the French, so they're wearing French uniforms. And so it forms in like 1916. But before that, you have Americans who are flying in France's Air Force, and before that, you have men in the French Foreign Legion from the U.S. or with U.S. ties. And so a lot of these men they just believe in fighting in the war for France and like believe that Germany is like an enemy to democracy and all that, and believing in like America's ties to the French. And so they're fighting for all these varied reasons. And they're kind of they're very much so creating like an alliance between the US and the French. And the French, for their part, are like holding these guys up as heroes and being like, look at our American volunteers and how they're fighting for our country. So yeah, they create like the Escadrille Américaine, and that's what it's called for about a year or so. It's renamed Lafayette Escadrille later. And most of this is happening in 1916 during the Battle of Verdun. So we see that they arrive at the airfield outside of Verdun, and most of that's true and correct. Verdun being like the longest and biggest battle of the war. And the French are defending their city of Verdun. And so that's over the skies of Verdun is where you kind of get the inception of the dogfight and the inception of like fighter pilots. So yeah, all that seems pretty good. And then, zooming ahead a little bit, when the US enters the war, like the Escadrille will be integrated kind of slowly into the US Armed Forces and will become their own squadron, the 103rd. So that's kind of like their overview. So yeah, let's see. What's his face? Played by what's his name? Martin Henderson. Okay. Cassidy. Yeah. So Cassidy comes down.
In a smoking plane.
And he's kind of an asshole, and then James Franco is kind of an asshole, and they're kind of like mean to each other for no reason. They're just like so snippy. And then he's like,
I'm gonna be the alpha male here.
He's like, I'm gonna be the best. And then Cassidy's like, oh man, you're funny, you might survive. And then he's like, do you guys even know what your life expectancy is? So he says 3 to 6 weeks, and yeah, that's pretty accurate. So being a fighter pilot was extremely dangerous. overall during the war, like if you were a fighter pilot during the war and served for a certain number of time, like your life expectancy was somewhere around like 6 weeks.
Yikes.
Average age of these fighter pilots is like 24. A lot of these kids are like really young, 18, 20 when they're like joining the force. And many of the greatest aces, the people who shoot down 5 or more enemy planes, many of the greatest fighters like die. Like most don't see the end of the war. So
including the Red Baron himself, right?
including the Red Baron himself. I think overall statistics are like about 1/4 of fighter pilots will die, and then like half of them will be wounded, injured, moved.
That's an insanely high statistic.
Right.
Yeah. So, and like even just to give just one number, about before the U.S. entered the war, 269 U.S. volunteers flew with France. So like that was across all their squadrons. It's like 270, and about 1/4 of them will die. So life expectancy of 3 to 6 weeks. Yeah, that's pretty accurate. What's killing them? First off, flying in this time is very dangerous. Very, very dangerous. Flying is new. It's in 1916. It's 13 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And accidents just happen every day. Training was very difficult and very dangerous. The RAF, the Royal Air Force, the British, one of their statistics is they crashed 15,000 planes just in training.
Jeez.
They didn't have a death thing with that, but in training, there's a lot of accidents, and it's dangerous to fly these things. A lot of times, the people have inadequate training, so they're just given a book and the joystick of a new plane, and they're just told to figure it out. Even then, these planes are not like modern planes at all. These planes are made out of wood. They are strips of wood covered with canvas, or in most cases linen, like cloth, literally, and held together by like piano wire. And then you put a engine on it that is like barely more powerful than a modern lawnmower, and you got a recipe for these fragile little things. Accidents happen, man, and there's no like safety anything. Like they have a seatbelt, but other than that, that's pretty much all they got.
And then you put a 30 cal machine gun right on the front of it,
Yeah,
just to seal the deal.
And then they're shooting at each other. And so when you get to shooting at each other, that's where a lot of these casualties come in. It's really dangerous. You're flying around, you're trying to kill the enemy, they're trying to kill you. And so when we get to what we'll see a bunch of dogfights in this movie. That's what's killing our guys. It's training. It's the fact that these airplanes are just really dangerous by themselves, and they're at war.
Yikes. Okay, on a lighter note, Whiskey is our squadron mascot.
Hell yeah, he is.
The strangest explanation to why there's a full-grown lion just roaming around.
But he likes people.
Base.
He's a friendly lion.
So in real life, it's a pair of lion cubs, which makes much more sense. And one is named Whiskey, and the other one is named Soda. So at least they had a little bit of humor with it. But yeah, they're not full grown in real life, which is much less unsettling. Still a little unsettling, but
if not friend, why friend shaped?
I
don't
look
at a lion and go, wow, that's shaped like a friend.
I mean, apparently Whiskey was really nice and liked to be pet. But yeah, they really did have 2 lions as the mascot. I guess a few of them were on leave in Paris, and somebody was trying to sell a lion cub, and they snapped it up.
As Americans do.
This will never go wrong.
They were like, one of them. So Raoul Lufberry, he's kind of like the inspiration for Cassidy. He was like the leading ace for a while in the squadron. At first he was like, we don't need a lion, what are you talking about? But then they saw the lion and he was like, yeah, we want the lion. So, and then he became like really inseparable with the lion Whiskey, and would train it to fake attack people when they came to visit.
That's
It
hilarious.
would get a good laugh out of everybody.
It's also worth mentioning at this point in the movie that you're realizing that there are no other Americans in this squadron. It already exists, but it's Cassidy and a bunch of new guys. And you're like, and you start to think, wait a second, why? Because he's not like, we're forming the escadrille. He's like, welcome to the Lafayette Escadrille. And the Lafayette Escadrille is just Cassidy. Like, that's it. That's all they have. And so you're like, huh, wait a second. This doesn't seem good.
But
That is true.
they do have the time to now train them with very close monitoring. And one by one, they take their first solo flight. They also learned how to shoot and tactics. 2 of them crash and wake up in heaven, being mended by an unnecessary number of French women.
There is no unnecessary number of French women. How dare you, sir?
I'm sorry. They're just 2 men.
A perfectly acceptable number of French
Okay,
women.
an adequate number of French women. I'm sorry. This is when we are going to meet Lucy in the sky. She is
With
in the
pilots.
sky later.
Lucy in the sky with pilots.
Isn't it Lucielle, you guys? Like
Lucienne.
Lucienne?
Yeah, Lucienne.
Lucine in the sky with pilots, if you will.
That's
So
terrible.
they get their first mission after labeling themselves the Knights of the Air.
They get their asses whooped.
Yep. So they're supposed to escort these 2 bombers to, is it Yametz?
Jametz. Yeah.
Jametz. Okay, Jametz, and where they'll destroy this ammunition depot. Yeah, they don't make it.
They get shredded, which
Yeah.
honestly, I like it from a historical standpoint because all too often we have the plucky young rookie squadron that goes up against these seasoned pros and holds their own. And in this movie, it's like you went up against the seasoned pros and 4 of you got shot down in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Cassidy kills 2 planes, nobody else touches one.
Yeah.
Like you get wrecked.
So they're going to fly over. They see the battle below. They're met with anti-aircraft fire. They fly higher, and then they're met with the German planes. And this is a good time to talk about French planes and German planes. So you kind of described, is that kind of just how airplanes in general are, kind of held together with duct tape? Or are German planes a little more sophisticated?
All great questions. I think everything in this movie historically is like 5 inches to the left or 5
Yep.
inches to the right, where you're like, okay, that's kind of close, but it definitely starts showing the cracks, like in the first scene or in the first mission scene. So, there's a lot to say about like airplane tactics, the difference between airplanes. But I'll start with like in the scene, they're like flying kind of low
Mhm.
over the trenches, and they're like, we should go up when they start getting anti-aircraft like guns pointed at them. Yeah, like why would they be flying 200 feet from the ground? That doesn't make any sense. Like, why would you ever do that? So in reality, these fighters are going to be at like 8,000 to 10,000 feet, somewhere in there.
Holy crap.
So what they're doing is,
With no cockpit, mind you. Like you're
Right,
literally just sitting
yeah.
in a hole in a balsa wood plane,
yeah, we'll get to
8,000
that.
feet above the ground.
Yeah, so what they're doing is they're trying to escort some bombers to go on like a strategic bombing run, and that's all well and good. That's all stuff that happened. But the reason that these planes keep seeing each other is, they're trying to find each other's reconnaissance planes.
Mhm.
So they're going around reconnaissance planes or bombing, and then the fighters, which they weren't called fighters as much, they were called like hunter planes. They were trying to find the other guy's planes and like shoot them down. And then when groups of fighters found each other, then it would be a dogfight. And so that's kind of what we get here. And yeah, this is it's really how it happens, where they just accidentally like come across each other and they're like, oh, I guess we fighting now.
Huh.
So yeah, the German airplanes come out of the sky from the sun, and that's good. That's good doctrine. That's definitely what you want to do. You want to attack from above, and you want to come from the sun. That's all great. The sun is not in the right position for anything, because they were supposedly flying at like 6 a.m, and the sun is like,
It's high noon.
yeah, it's like high noon up there. So I mean, that's just one thing to think about. But
And your planes might be like 40 miles from the front line, you know, like when you take off, like you're like a 20-minute jaunt to the front line, maybe.
You're like, what's happening here? So yeah, there's like a lot of things that are just like, this is just like 5 inches to the left, 5 inches to the right. This isn't quite right, but like it's okay, you know, like there's some plausibility. So the planes they're flying, so we had a scene earlier where like they bring in their new planes and they come out of the fog and it's all real cool, really great shot. That was the best part of the movie. It's all downhill from there. But so they fly in the French Newport 17s, and so that's what the Allies have, or
well, hold on one second.
Have.
I do have a certain thing on that shot. And this is not one of my questions, but can they see when they're driving the planes on the ground? Because they're like angled towards the sky. It looks like they can't see at all.
Yeah, they're gonna be like looking. They're gonna have to look out the side
because those guys were definitely not. They were just like it, like because they're farther away in the shot. But I was looking at the actors that are driving the planes, and I'm like, they're just sitting there. They can't see anything. There's no way. So
no, and they don't have like instrumentation or anything. So
right. So I was like, thinking
the planes are. I think the Newports in particular would be pointed up a little more than like even planes of the time. But yeah, that's all pretty normal. So we got the Newport 17s, which are given to our Americans, and then they're facing off against the German triplane, which is the Fokker DR1. And so here's historically where we start to go a little off the rails. The time period that this movie is set in is like 1916, and then it kind of goes into early 1917 when America joins the war. The Fokker DR1 did not appear until after this time period, so like they're like a year off. But however, this is the thing. Okay, so the Fokker DR1, the triplane, is the most famous plane from the war, not because of its actual merits in the sky, but just because it's just one of those images of the war. So it's like really famous for its imagery. It's got 3 wings, dude. It's so cool. But it's got a reputation that far outpaced its contributions to the war effort. And some of the reasons that it's so famous, especially the German ones, because the Allies had triplanes as well, is that 2 of the most famous German aces, Werner Voss and the Red Baron, Baron von Richthofen, were shot down in that plane, and they got kills in that plane. Werner Voss also, they swore by those planes. But in any case, we got these 2 planes going up against each other. So the triplane. Why are we doing triplanes? What is the goal with the triplane? So in general, all the British, French, the British and German, they both tried out triplanes. The French first. The British first. There we go. Figured it out. So the British tried out a triplane first, and it's pretty effective. The point of the triplane is when you have a biplane, you have 2 wings, and they're really long. The point of the triplane is to shorten the wings and add another wing and get the wings really thin to theoretically reduce drag. And when you get the plane that small, it becomes really maneuverable. So the triplanes, and this is true, the triplanes are very much more maneuverable than just a biplane.
It would make it harder to hit target too, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And so as the reason that they're trying out the triplane is because as dogfights are getting more prevalent, they're like, okay, what's going to be better in a dogfight? Something that's faster or more maneuverable. So they go for increased maneuverability, and they're less stable, so they're kind of harder to fly. But in the hands of an expert pilot, they're going to be better for you. However, they were wrong about one thing, is that it actually increased drag because you have more wing surface, and like the aerodynamics get funky, and like their wind tunnel experiments probably weren't the most solid. So the triplanes are slower. So think of the Newports as faster, triplanes more maneuverable. Okay. They both kind of have similar armaments. They both got the Fokker has 2 machine guns shooting through the propeller. It's got a better rate of climb, but not because of the triplane, or not because of the 3 wings, because of the engine was actually like tilted upwards, because the Germans decided we would rather have a better rate of climb than speed because they think that's better in a dogfight. So, in terms of like pros and cons, that's kind of the main thing where the Newports are faster, and that can be a big deal. And then the German fuckers are
The German what now?
the German fuckers are more maneuverable.
Starting to sound like Dustin over there, man.
Nah.
Hey, not on the podcast. I'm squeaky clean.
Those Kraut Fockers.
I never said that. I just said
that. I said Kraut. So yeah, but I mean, in terms of history, yeah, the DR1 isn't gonna appear until like September of 1917, like a whole year after this.
Okay.
So that's, and also they're never gonna be in this kind of numbers, so only about 350 or so triplanes were made for the Germans.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the Newport 17, that was like put into big production, and that was like 3,200 units ish. So Newport 17s, yeah, these are good. They would be flying these. The Germans would be flying Albatross D1, 2s, 3s, the Halberstadt D2, stuff like that. So they get some things wrong, and it's just kind of weird that they have every single one of their planes. It's all across the board a Fokker DR1.
Yeah.
And they all look identical. They're all red, except for the one, the evil McPilot, the evil Von Pilot guy. His is black.
He's returned.
Our air Nazi.
So, yeah, exactly, dude. It's the same character. So, yeah, the only person who had an all red triplane was the Red Baron, because people were very individualized, and they painted their airplanes whatever they wanted. They had personal insignia, they had personal color schemes, and the Red Baron became famous for having his red. So it just seems like the filmmakers are like, all of them were red, and all of them looked the same. And so it just, I don't know. They just took that imagery. They both fell prey to the heightened reputation of the triplane, the red triplane, and they also continued that heightened reputation.
So we have a black guy named Skinner, and then the evil guy is the Black Baron.
The Black Baron. Yeah, they call him Black Falcon, right?
Yeah. Interesting.
So yeah, those are the two planes, and they're gonna meet at the skies over Verdun.
And they don't. It's not somewhere. It's not too great for our French, I guess, sympathizers. Yeah, so they're going to get shot down a few times. One of them is going to be our 13-year-old pilot that gets shot down, but he does survive. He's going to land not before or shortly after, I should say. He gets a strafe run on him by our evil. Does he have a mustache? I don't know if he has a mustache.
He doesn't, but he should.
He should have a mustache.
How else is he supposed to twirl it?
Yes. He runs parallel to the plane. I don't feel like you have to be a trained pilot to understand that's a bad idea. Why did he not run perpendicular to the plane that can only shoot in a straight line where it's flying? Whatever.
It's like people in movies who run away from like falling buildings and they just run down the length of the building.
But
like that skyscraper might be 20 yards wide, but it's like 300 feet tall. So hear me out. Maybe run left to right and do your best.
Yeah, anyways. So this is like unheard of, uncalled for. There's a line where the squadron leaders, like, reports can be filed. What is this referring to? What would a report about someone breaking rules of combat during this time? Is this a thing?
No, I really don't know what he's talking about. It might just mean like, oh, I'll pass it on to my superiors and then it'll die there. Like it feels like a hand wavy thing from the military guy, and also a hand wavy thing from the filmmakers on just like, I don't know, they didn't know how to write that dialogue or something. I don't really know what it means.
You can make as many promises about like prosecuting war crimes, perceived and otherwise, as much as you want, but unless you win, nobody cares.
Gotcha.
So like at this point in the war, nobody's winning, but France is 110% not winning. So it's an even emptier threat in 1916 because it's like, yes, you guys who are just taking horrendous casualties every time you fart are going to not only win, but go after this singular pilot for mowing down this singular other pilot.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
All right, so after Franco plays his, look at how helpless my handsome self is with this young lady, we are back to action. They're trying to cut off a German bombing party, and they successfully take out the bomber plane, but again, they're struggling with the fighter planes. Casualties are suffered on both sides, ending with Rawlings and a single German pilot. That German has him dead to rights, but then salutes him and flies off. I'm confused.
What's troubling you, my friend?
Okay, so he's just like, they're in the air. They're like, it's essentially, they're close enough. It's like sitting next to someone in traffic. And he's just like, I could have had you, but I'm going to let you go. And they refer to later in the movie, they go like, maybe it was because of that, the pilot being killed after he's down. Like maybe it was his way of saying like, our bad, you know, we'll let you live.
Might be.
This seems a little far-fetched. It's still war.
Yeah,
right?
It's still war, but stuff like this did actually happen.
Okay.
So pilots had a lot of respect for each other, given that they knew, the dangers of being a pilot. So there were, acts of mercy and I guess you might call it chivalry that happened. So this isn't totally just made up. I think, 9 times out of 10, he would have just shot him down. But, it's a movie and it did happen. This one is especially reminiscent because in the movie, Rawlings machine gun jams. And so when his machine gun jams, he has no way to fire back. So he's just dead in the water. Mm-hmm. So all he can do is maneuver. So one thing that he, of course, doesn't do is maneuver and try to like save his life at all. Which I found
he's just like,
so like we needed a dramatic moment. So he kind of like closes his eyes and waits for the end instead of like,
don't we hear gunshots?
Trying to disengage. Yeah. I guess the German guy just fired over him or something. I don't know.
He's like, that's just, I don't know. Whatever.
I think they actually took that. Okay, so this is what I'm saying about, like, they take World War II stuff and they just plug it into this movie. There is a relatively famous story about a Focke-Wulf 190 pilot during the air raids over Germany in World War II, finding a crippled B-17 and firing at it, realizing that it was crippled and escorting it to the English Channel.
That's pretty cool.
Because in his rationalization, like Samuel said, flying even in World War II is dangerous enough that I'm not going to kill somebody who can't fight back. Like we both took this mutual risk to get up here in the air. I'll be damned if I, put down a guy who has fought hard and now literally can't do anything to stop his own death.
And this actually isn't just like them taken from World War II, because this did happen in the First World War.
Oh, yeah.
One especially famous one where the French Ace of Aces, Georges Guynemer.
I'm not
nailed it.
One.
Did you guys hear that? Yeah. So Guynemer spares one of the most famous German pilots, Ernst Udet, when Udet's his machine guns jammed.
Yeah.
And when Guynemer sees that, he flies over him, gives him a wave, and they both, part for home. And a lot of time that is how dogfights would end anyways. Both sides would run out of bullets and then they would like look at each other and they'd be like, well, I guess we just scurry for home, like, grateful to be alive.
You have like 4 to 5 3-second bursts maybe loaded into your machine gun. So you got like 3 trigger pulls and then you're done.
So up the ante, Franco returns in a plane to surprise a French woman while hopefully not traumatizing the children who lost their parents in a bombing raid.
No, that's funny.
Totally irresponsible use of military equipment. Using a plane to get pussy, though, I don't blame him. This is when I put, can she suddenly understand him? Because, like, last time they met, she spoke no English, and now she's speaking, like, a quarter of the language.
It's the magic of the movies, man.
Headcanon, she has two other pilots on the side, and so between the three of them,
She
They're-
was a
they're all
prostitute all
teaching her.
along.
Nice.
Skinner. I barely know her.
Damn. So Eddie
that was bad.
Eddie Beagle,
I know.
apparently real name Arthur Baker, the one accused of being a spy. Is he real? And this bank robbery story, is this a real thing?
Nah.
All right, moving on.
Yeah, I mean, we could.
Moving
Yeah,
on.
like it's just nah. That's
No.
you know the closest thing. The closest thing I could find in the actual Lafayette Escadrille was there's an American who was part of the U.S. Navy and deserted the U.S. Navy in like 1913.
Mm-hmm.
Then the war starts and he like finds himself in France, and then he joins up to fight for France, and then somebody finds out about it or he confesses, and then he basically becomes an American spy within the French Air Force until he dies. So that was like the closest I could find.
He was a spy in an Allies Air Force?
More or less, yeah. So like
Oh.
in exchange for forgiveness for deserting,
Right.
and also please don't tell the French that I'm a deserter because they'll kill me. He gave like the U.S. government intelligence before the U.S. was in the war. So that was the closest
That's
I
interesting.
could find.
All
And
right.
to be fair, the U.S. In World War I lags even when they enter the war criminally far behind in anything that isn't rifles, boots, and men. So like machine guns, tanks, planes. We have a big navy, which is cool, but like all the things that by late World War I are desperately needed to conduct campaigns, we do not have. Like we don't have artillery, we don't have planes. We haven't even been developing them really to the same extent because we're not in a war. And so I'm sure there was a little bit of like, hey, man, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You can give me those blueprints from the fancy shoot planes that those guys have over there. It'd be much appreciated because we don't have them.
That's fair. Okay. So they say they spotted a group of Fokkers. They're heading towards our infantry on the road to Rambutort, something like that. The boys intercept just in time as a
The
line of
boys.
civilians. As a line of civilians and soldiers are about to be ambushed. Oh wait, no, they're already blown to bits, and then our heroes arrive. I thought that was such a weird. We have to get there right now, and then we see them attack. Bombs being dropped on helpless civilians, and then we show up and hey, it could have been worse. It's like, oh wow, okay. Well, at least they're making it a little more realistic, I guess.
Yeah.
Best shot of the movie when Skinner gets the German guy from below and shoots a bullet that exits the top of his head. That was beautiful. Rawlings finds the German who let him go before, considers returning the favor, but since he's on the tail of one of his comrades, he decides to kill him.
Yeah, probably the right choice.
Our bank robber is going to go down. This is the most what the hell scene of this movie.
You're
Oh,
so
yeah.
right, dude.
Oh, yeah.
You're so right.
So Beetle goes down
Oh,
in no man's
gosh.
land.
Yeah, tell
All
us in detail.
Rawlings is like, I can see him. He's trapped under the plane, and these hundreds of French soldiers around don't realize what they need to do. So he's just going to land the plane too, run through no man's land, crouch down, and then it's funny that James Franco is helping someone free their hand, and it doesn't take an entire movie. 127 hours to be exact.
Wow.
And then he cuts the dude's hand off. And I was like, oh my gosh, is this when he was like, I have to do this movie?
But not before these two no-name French soldiers out of the goodness of their heart are like, I'm going to sprint halfway across no man's land to help these pilots. One of them gets blown up before he even gets there. The other one gets there, offers his help. James Franco goes, waits until a machine gun starts firing, and then goes, okay, go.
Now
Lifts
stand
the
up.
plane just for this poor French guy to get cut in half from shoulder to hip, lifting the plane. And then he just looks at it and he's like, oh, whoops. But hey,
This
And
is
then
why
he
I'm not-
steals his shovel.
Yeah, he does. But that is how he gets a shovel. So that's
he
fair.
knew they couldn't get the plane off. He just needed to sacrifice a French soldier for his shovel.
Yeah. What the hell's this scene, man?
This scene is terrible. It appears, to the best of my vision, it appears that Blaine Rawlings lands in no man's land, which
Yeah.
A would be impossible because shells, like shell holes, craters.
Right.
B, he's on some hill in the middle of no man's land, which that wouldn't be possible because they would have either blown up or taken the hill, one of the two sides. Like you're fighting over, like it's a hill, that's the high ground. Like it's a huge hill that like he's surveying the battle. Anyway, he would have been shot. He would have been shot like 1,800 times trying to get the guy, trying to cut off his hand because he broke cover to cut off his hand. And eagle-eyed viewers will see that some of the German soldiers are wearing pickelhaubes, which is a crafty reference to how the filmmakers don't know what year they're in. Those are all gone by 1915. They weren't wearing pickelhaubes anymore. So yeah, this whole scene it's just all ridiculous.
The French soldiers are
The very
also not
movie.
wearing helmets. And again, it's 1916, and it's like my good sirs, everybody has a helmet on now. Your
They're
cat
very-
in the trench has a pot on its head. Like
Do you guys know where this was shot? This specific scene?
Ohio.
No,
California.
no. I'm gonna butcher this. Hatfield, Hertfordshire.
Hertfordshire. In
Hertfordshire.
England?
I guess I don't know.
Yeah, that's England.
The same location as Band of Brothers and Saving Private Ryan. So we have 3 war classics shot on the same ground.
What's the third one? Because you only named Saving Private Ryan and Band of Brothers.
No, I thought that was funny if they're shooting on like hallowed ground and they're like, all right, so I'm going to land it in no man's land. I'm going to run to your plane.
This is where Dick Winters led his one-man charge against that German unit. This is
That's
where,
ridiculous.
Private Ryan blew up that half track and saved Tom Hanks' life. And this is where James Franco's going to hack this man's hand off with a shovel.
It looks
And the fact that it comes off in one blow. What is this thing with filmmakers?
I think it was 2. I think he
Still.
hits it twice.
What is this thing with filmmakers that like human arms and bone and sinew can just be like eviscerated with one
It's a
fell
very
swoop?
sharp shovel.
Apparently, it must also weigh 250 pounds.
Yikes.
Franco lifts.
So yeah, doesn't look anything like the rest of the UK landscape that they shot the rest of the movie in. You mentioned the Royal Air Force earlier. The aerial shots were shot around Royal Air Force Holton. I guess that's a pretty famous one. I don't know what it means,
Okay,
but maybe
interesting.
one of you guys do. Moving on.
I'm just picturing like a Typhoon Eurofighter in 2006 flying up next to these biplane stunt planes and be like, hey, dude.
So also, they had actual lightweight replica planes that they were using. And then it just says there was an accident. I looked into it. I can't find it. Maybe it's out there. I could not find any information. They just said there was an accident,
Nah,
and then they stopped
scraped
using
that
them.
knowledge from the internet, dude. something terrible happened.
It turns out James Franco was not the lead. We don't get to know who the lead was.
Oh. Yeah, so Germans have taken over the town that Lucien lives in. He flies to her, because of course, why not? Rescues
Lucy in the town with Germans.
So rescues her younger siblings and then plans to return to her, but the evil schnitzel munchers have arrived already. Rawlings turns his plane off in the air in order to glide down for a landing undetected.
Yeah.
During this scene, okay? By the way, by this point, I was like, I'm not finishing this movie sober. So I was like, I'm going to do another beer.
You're like, I'm pausing this. This is enough for me.
It's a hard ride without booze, that's for sure.
This was either 1 going on 2 or 2 going on 3. I don't know. But I got up to get another beer. Right as this scene happens, they're taking off in this plane. And I go, what if she got shot? And Elin goes, oh, shit, she did. So Lucine is losing a lot of blood. Most excellent line. Leave this plane and return to your quarters. And he goes, yes, sir. And then flies away.
That was funny.
The dialogue is not a strong suit in this movie, but that was a funny line.
Every once in a while they have it. Yeah, so a few notes on this. This is where the filmmaker, like, what the hell are you talking about? So first they're like, I don't really know where Lucienne's house is. I have no idea where it is, but
Mhm.
they're like, oh, the Germans are crossing the Meuse River. It's like that doesn't happen until 1918, and this is very much
Oof.
before 1917. So I don't know what they're talking about. And then we see outside her house a whole army of German soldiers and tanks. Once again, that's a year too early. I'll ignore that. What I'm confused about, is how they're all passing her house, and then Rawlings gets there that night, and then the Germans knock on her door. Like, huh? Like, what were they doing this whole time? As soon as they saw that house, they would raid that house and take all the eggs and food and like, like what?
They take all the geese. We've seen this before.
Yeah. So, yeah. None of this made sense. Also, when he's escaping, Rawlings, they're about to take off, and two Germans are in front of them, and
Yeah.
he shoots, killing the Germans. But as we noted earlier, the plane is tilted
Right.
upwards. That's not how bullets work.
So maybe he hit birds above them. They fell down. Their beaks penetrated the guy's skulls.
That's it. Yeah, like that's the only way it makes sense. He
I-
would physically have to crash the plane to shoot those men in front of him. Unfortunately,
Lucien actually was packing a machine pistol and
Ooh.
shot it through the canvas of the plane.
Forgot about that, dude.
Yeah,
But
couldn't he have just leaned over and shot him with his pistol?
Yeah.
But okay, anyways, moving on. Hey, real quick though, German occupied cities in World War One versus World War Two. Is it much more pleasant? I don't know if you
Much
should
more
say pleasant. Like, is it less? You're slaves now. Go to camps.
No,
Or what did they do in World War One compared to World War Two?
Okay. Yeah, it's still kind of, they sent Belgians and French people back to Germany to work in camps and provide labor. The occupation of Belgium was pretty rough. The occupation of France was pretty rough. It was definitely different from World War II because in World War One they only have about like 3 to 4% of France.
Okay.
It's just the northeastern territory of France, and then like most of Belgium. Whereas in the Second World War, they kind of take over most of France when they capitulate, and then there's like the resistance movement.
There's also the difference, like in the sense that World War II is a Nazi colonization war, in the sense like they are taking over Europe to make it the Third Reich, and so they approach conquering territories as like a governmental project, and so they legitimately build a government of French threatened with death sympathizers to like put in Nazi and Third Reich law. But the weird part about France specifically in World War II is with the massive asterisks of you're not Jewish, homosexual, one of the traveler people, so gypsies, part of the resistance, or piss off a Nazi officer, they kind of actually leave most of France alone, which is interesting, partly because of their racial values, partly because of the just sheer economic value of leaving France intact for the Nazis.
Gotcha.
So weirdly, your day-to-day in, as crazy as this is to say out loud, your day-to-day in Nazi France, if you are not an active target of the Nazis, might actually be slightly more pleasant than it is in World War One. Because in World War One, it is a purely military occupation. So it's martial law. You're under the command of the local colonel, general, whoever army conquered your territory, and justice against his soldiers is his prerogative. Whereas like in Third Reich France, again, with the massive looming asterisks, because Nazis are bad, and I'm not saying they're not evil, but with the massive looming asterisks of not being actively targeted by the Nazis, your day-to-day life was weirdly not that different than it was beforehand for a large period of the war, which is part of the reason the French resistance is not as large or as violent as other countries' resistance groups.
All right.
Yeah, it's weird historical tidbit where like all of Europe is brutally oppressed by the Nazis, and then like half of France is brutally oppressed by the Nazis. like if you have to pick a Nazi occupied territory in World War II, you pick France. Like you just, because they capitulate fast, and so the Nazis don't feel the need to like constantly break it off in their ass as much as other places.
Okay. Next mission. a German Zeppelin is on its way to bomb Paris. Bring it down. We talked about these in our Wings episodes, but Zeppelins are so cool. Let's do it again. Man, what the hell are these things? Why do we not have them anymore? I want Zeppelins to come back. Please.
This is one that Samuel asked me to field because there were a lot of questions for this movie. He goes, "Can you handle the giant shooty balloon?" I'm like, "Yeah, I got
Big
you."
shooty balloon, dude.
So Zeppelins are basically glorified hot air balloons. Like that's all they are. The reason they're so hard to shoot down though is they are stupidly large. Like they're like maybe not a full football field, but we're talking like dozens of yards long of giant balloon, and they're lifted with individual hydrogen cells, and so even if you puncture one, the whole balloon's not going to collapse because it's heavy fabric stretched over like a aluminum alloy frame.
Gotcha.
And then to top it all off, incendiary bullets up until like 1917 don't work worth a crap because they're new. And so if your incendiary bullets work, a Zeppelin is really easy to shoot down because hydrogen is incredibly flammable. If your incendiary bullets don't work, which often they don't, or you don't get close enough to use them because Zeppelins are covered in machine guns and anti-aircraft cannons, not to mention the dozen to 50 fighters that are surrounding them as they fly through the air. You can bring them down, but this is another weird thing. They are used on bombing runs, but they're wildly ineffective because they're so high up. And so this is, again, like Samuel said, the directors of this movie not knowing anything about World War I other than like propaganda posters, I think. The image of the Zeppelin raids over London is terrifying in the sense that, oh my God, the Germans can cross the channel. In reality, a couple hundred people die compared to the Blitz where it's like tens of thousands of people. They make it exactly like twice, I think. And then they give up because they're like, this isn't doing crap. Like, we're wasting valuable resources, men, and material to drop bombs in cow fields. So they're mostly scouting, but they're intimidating. And the psychological shock of being in like a biplane and there only being a handful of you and seeing this Zeppelin would be probably scarier than what the Zeppelin can actually do, truth be told.
All right.
I could guess. That sounds about right, Samuel? I missed anything important?
Nah, I mean, the only thing I would add is just like these bombing runs weren't very effective in terms of like kills or like damage, but they were like really effective in like spreading terror.
Yeah.
They only happened at night and they were flying really high up. And that's something you said. So like, they're not really hitting targets very well. So this broad daylight attack on Paris doesn't make any sense for the year that we're supposed to be in.
Right. And it doesn't make any sense for there to be only one. Like even Zeppelin raids, there's a couple because not a lot, but like 2 or 3 usually. It's also the thing like Zeppelins don't usually stand and fight. Like part of what makes them so hard to shoot down is they're closed cabins. They just go higher than your biplanes do.
It's like, true, yeah. They would operate like 20,000 feet. And these planes can only really, these pilots can only really survive at like 10, 12,000.
Okay. But you also don't have anything resembling a modern bomb sight. So you effectively have a guy with binoculars or a telescope looking down at a speck that is making it a bigger speck and saying, yeah, that looks about right. Let's drop a bomb and see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much.
Oof. All right. Well, it also gives us a great visual. Cassidy meets his arch nemesis. The two engage in a dogfight. He meets his end via the double Black Cross pilot, Evil Von, random German pilot, dude.
Evil Von Bulletproof, apparently.
I guess so.
Like I hate the freaking Hollywood trope where 2 starfighters, planes, battleships, whatever, are going right at each other and they're both aiming dead center and one of them completely misses and you're like, that's not possible. Yeah. Like you both just died. Like you'd never do that, and the only reason you do it is because there's 100% guarantee that you both just die.
But Cassidy's gonna get the last laugh though. He's gonna cause a Hindenburg in the sky whenever he crashes his plane into the Zeppelin. There's also a little little thing here. The landing gear of one plane completely destroying the wings of another and sending this plane down. Not like landing gear even nowadays is still faulty and like the weakest part of a plane. I can't imagine it being much better when it looks like two wheelbarrow wheels just attached by a couple sticks. I don't think it doesn't look very sturdy on these planes, and it just completely demolishes the wings of one of these German planes here. So not realistic.
Yeah, that's probably not happening. Also, the
Alright.
way that, he cuts the throttle and just like grinds to a halt as if he's in a race car, but in the sky,
Right.
and then smashes the top of the other guy. That ain't happening. He would have just like drifted a little slower and the other guy would have shot him down. It reminded me though of a couple of really famous Russian pilots. I don't know, I can't remember their names, but they got famous for using grappling hooks and ropes to destroy enemy aircraft. And so they would throw a grappling hook out, catch the guy, and then it would be tied to a slightly more sturdy part of their plane, and just hope that you both don't die.
Russian combat aviation is like the best history ever.
It's crazy.
There's a World War II group of all female bomber pilots who fly these jank ass old planes, and in order to not get shot down by anti-aircraft or enemy fighters, they do night raids where they turn all the lights off in their plane, they turn their engines off, they dive bomb the city, and then they restart the engine before they hit the ground.
My goodness.
Pull up. They're called the Night Witches.
Russians know how to party, man. They know how to party.
Cassidy gets a 21 gun salute. Is this American in origin?
So actually, no. The 21 gun salute is, best we can tell, French in origin.
I'll be damned.
Believe it or not. Not necessarily the way they do it in the movie, though. The way they do it in the movie is incredibly American.
Okay.
In the sense that all the countries that do some form of a 21 gun salute do it for different reasons. And the line 7 guns up in like handheld guns up in a line and then fire them is a very American component of it. In France, they really only give the 21 gun salute, at least now, to their president, and it's part of his military honors. Anytime there's a head of state visit or some sort of military thing, and they use 75 millimeter guns. And they use 2 of them.
Holy cow.
And so they fire 21 shots. They cycle between the guns. And then the origin of it is it starts somewhere in the 1500s. And warships coming across each other would fire into the sky or out to sea until its ammunition was depleted to show that it had peaceful intent.
Okay.
And then, things go boom, people like it, they appropriate it for all sorts of reasons. And so it's not implausible. I can't speak for whether it was used in World War I specifically, but it's not implausible that the French would have an idea of what this thing is.
Yeah.
And they've served with enough Americans at this point that they do specifically for the Americans, because that is something that combined armed forces have done through history, is if you know what like the say goodbye culture is to the soldier you lost, you try to replicate it if you can.
That's fair.
And the reason he would get it and the other pilots wouldn't is because he's the head of the squadron, he's the most decorated pilot, and he died flying himself into a Zeppelin. So he would kind of earn, so to speak, that honor.
All right, I'm not gonna lie, I totally missed the setup for this last fight. I may have been like 4 deep at this point and just missed it.
They're going back to the same place they got their asses kicked the first time.
All right, that's fair. When did the kids return to Reims? Weren't they on the base? She goes in the ambulance. They specifically did not go with her when she went to the hospital. No,
they went with her uncle, and I guess the implication is her uncle lives in Reims, because when they leave Reims, there's that bald guy with like the slouch cap on, and I'm assuming that's
I never saw them go back with the uncle, but again.
They didn't. No, they didn't show it. He mentioned it in passing.
Oh, okay.
Because that's how we do things in this movie, is we just say that they happened.
We're gonna fly through this. Did it? Anyways.
No boy.
All right, so a guy's got a hook for a hand. That can't be easy. Flying a plane. Just real quick, would he be allowed to or not, or would they'd be like, go home, dude?
You know what? It's likely he'd be allowed to fly.
Okay.
He'd be allowed to fly, because the French were kind of, these Americans volunteers want to fly for us. They want to put their lives on the line. Let them fly, let them fly, dude.
Who are we to say no?
All right. What's the glass that he uses to spot the planes above? Is it literally just like a tinted piece of glass that he's looking through, or is that scientific? Or
yeah, that's what it looked like. Pilots had they had their flight goggles, and a
Mhm.
lot of the time they would be tinted with amber, or they'd be tinted like blue or green to help prevent against sun glare and help prevent. Sometimes it cut down on haze when you're like trying to look far off in the distance.
Yeah.
Sometimes those glasses could help you like spot something.
What are these new planes in our big finale fight here? Are these the bombers? These German bomber planes, or
I
they almost look like
don't.
grasshoppers?
Oh, the big planes. They're British bombers.
Oh, they're British bombers. Okay.
Oh, the British.
Yes.
Okay, that's what you're talking about. Yeah, those are British bombers.
Fun.
I don't really have a lot to say on them.
That's all right. I was just curious.
They drop bombs.
Nice.
They dropped the bombs, man. They did it really effectively too.
Oh,
So
good for them.
Eddie finally hits a plane.
Good for him. No one cares.
No one cares. For the love of God. Okay, here's the thing though. Once you realize that, like, in the movie, he kind of looks like the guy that came from a very wealthy family. I know he's not the character that comes from a wealthy family, but anyways. And then you find out he's the son of like one of the richest men ever, and you're like,
In real life.
do something right for once. Like, shut up, dude. You're fine.
And also, the guy who saves the day is the person that we've criminally neglected during this podcast. There's a nice little side plot where one of the better pilots gets PTSD and can't fly for the rest of the movie. It shakes him to his core, and then he comes back in the 11th hour.
I have that, Kyle. I have that.
Oh, yeah,
The
that's coming
Deus
out.
Ex Machina.
I put it in here. Okay, he
But
has
we
him in
didn't
his
talk
sights,
about him before.
but he's outnumbered until he's joined by someone else. I can't tell who's who with the goggles on. I'm
It's
sorry. That's my script. That's what I wrote.
Yeah, it's Jensen, and the only reason I bring him up is because like that's actually a really good handling of like shell shock, so to speak, or like PTSD in World War One, in the sense that it just gets you. You just wake up in the in the middle of the night broken. Sometimes, not for everybody.
Okay,
but
and then he doesn't go up until the very end. Yeah.
no, he can't. Yeah, he can't make himself do it. And
Okay.
I think I don't know how accurate it is. I like the feel good respect that the squadron gives him in the sense like this could happen to any of us, so we're not going
Right.
to rag on you for it being you.
Sure, yeah.
However, having read about reactions to shell shock and PTSD in the early 1900s by people who hit it better than others, I'm not entirely sure that's super accurate. People kind of were assholes about it for a lot of the time.
Yeah, there's definitely accounts of like people just being too drunk and going up and flying and getting themselves killed.
Mad
But yeah,
respect.
in this case, this guy is, he's, I don't really know exactly what his problem was. He saw his friend die, I think, and like just was like afraid of flying after that.
Well, he saw the guy burned to death, right? Or is that
If
later in
if
the
he
movie?
did, if he did, that's more accurate. I think that might be true. Because like mostly these pilots were afraid of dying like really slowly in fire, so most would choose to jump, and sometimes people would take pistols up, which they showed in the movie too. This movie kind of feels just like every little reference, like, yeah, this like was reported to happen, like it's just like there's one person for every like
Right.
thing that might have happened.
I do like that the villain, even though he shouldn't be a villain, that the villain that they forced in this movie is legitimately a better pilot than all the guys he faces. Like, I like a villain who has to be brought down by clever means because he is just legitimately the best at what he does, as we will discuss here momentarily.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't really have much to say about it, man. At this point, they've been up like 8 times. It's my biggest complaint with this movie. They should have done it in like 3 scenes.
You
I
really
know-
start to feel this movie's 2:15.
Well, it's
218.
It's just too much of the same stuff. We're up in the air, we're fighting, we're back down. We're up in the air, we're fighting, we're back down. It's too many times, man, and it just starts to feel like, okay, hold on, wait, which one was this? I can't tell one mission from the other. I don't know what we're doing. I don't feel like it's effective, and it's not enough to make me feel like one of the pilots, like, oh, this is all I do. It
feels like a video game.
Yeah, it feels like levels of a video game, and I'm watching a walkthrough. They should have broken it down and done like 3 times they went up in the air and had show a progression between those 3 and make them unique. That each one of these feels exactly the same. So literally, you just have Rawlings going back out after they successfully land. He's going to attack the German base. He is going to outmaneuver our enemy here, the German pilot, until he's then flanked by other German pilots.
Ugh, those bastards don't respect the 1v1.
Right, 1v1 me, bro. And then this is when Jensen shows up and saves the day. And then I think Skinner also shows up. And
They show up like at the end when everything's over.
Yeah, so then Rawlings gets shot, and then they're like flying right next to each other. Pulls out his pistol, and kaboom. Done.
And he never finds his lady love, but he does go on to own one of the biggest ranches in Texas.
Yeah, we didn't watch any ranching in this movie. You made me sit through freaking romance for half of it, and if it was all made up, what was the point? Why'd you make me sit through made up romance if it's not even gonna pay off?
It's funny. Okay, so real quick before we get to like everybody's epilogue,
the epilogues.
Yeah, dude, hold on. Yeah, those are funny for their own right. But so Rawlings shoots Black Falcon with a pistol, which is something that happened, especially in the early war before they put guns on the planes. They'd be shooting at each other with like shotguns or rifles or pistols. Unfortunately, Rawlings missed Black Falcon by about 8 feet because he did not lead him. So Black Falcon is still out there and did not in fact die. Instead he pointed the pistol directly at him, and it would have gone behind him by about 5 to 8 feet. So that was a bummer on that.
So Black
part.
Falcon's wingman had a really bad day after that.
I guess so.
Yeah, okay. I was like, that's cool, but also it was so obvious. Whatever. I knew as soon as he pulled up next to him, which didn't make any sense. Why? Because he's evil. And he's like, haha, I'm going to look at you before I kill you. And he just pulls up right next to him. I was like, you're going to get shot by a pistol, dude.
You're going to get shot, you goober.
Speaking of obvious, is it time for everybody's favorite sections?
What?
We just want to talk the epilogue? Is that what you're talking about?
The biggest nope, and the most excellent line?
I mean, we can do most excellent line. We can do. I don't care. We have the epilogues to get through. I never would have thought to call them epilogues. That's great though.
I feel like we don't even have to talk about it because they're all like
they're not real.
It seems weird to do epilogues at the end of a movie for fictional characters.
Yeah.
Well, okay. If Eugene, the Skinner character, is based on a real person,
okay,
and he was never a part of this like specific group, but he was like one of the very early like pilots,
right,
in a different group. Why not at least say that's what he did? He went on to join this other group that he was actually in. No, they see he was part of the airmail.
Yeah, okay, are you ready for
understand.
This? All right, so Skinner is based off Eugene Bullard. He was an African American, and he was in France at the time of the war, and he was a boxer, so that's pretty cool. But he'd been around doing odd jobs in England and France. And he became the first black fighter pilot in kind of not in the Lafayette Escadrille, but with the French in some other form. He flew 20 missions with the French. And at some point he was transferred by some higher up who, when they were kind of selecting for the Lafayette Escadrille, they, this guy, Dr. Gross or something, he was selecting them based on like, okay, who isn't German? And I guess he was also racist too. So like, the black guy doesn't get in either. And so he kind of gets moved to a desk job for the rest of the war. But then Bullard, the first black pilot ever, he started like a jazz nightclub in Paris that people visited. He was all over the place. He was a colorful like figure in post-war Paris. When the Nazis came, he was part of the resistance movement.
Hell yeah.
And the reason that like eventually like he was really successful agent for the resistance because the Nazis first, believe that black people are inferior, so they don't really see him as a threat. And second, the Nazis could not comprehend that the French would work with a black man. So he ended up being a really effective agent for like the French resistance. And then in 1954, so like the 40-year anniversary of the start of the war, uh, Bullard got to reignite like the flame that's at the tomb of the unknown soldier in France under the Arc de Triomphe. And so that's that's symbolic. They reignite it every day or so, or however they do. I don't know what they do now, but so like he got that cool like kind of moment in the 50s where he and a couple other World War I vets were like reigniting the flame, and it's like, damn, that would be a cool movie. This guy seems awesome.
Just make a movie about him. Like,
make a movie about this one character. So yeah, just some like history cleanup, if I may. Everybody else is kind of more loosely based on somebody or an amalgamation of 2 or 3 persons that really lived. So I can't really get into everybody specifically. However, Captain Thénault is a real person. Georges Thénault was the French commander. He was the French captain. And he flew in missions with them, so that's one thing.
Yes, but so the character Jean Reno was terrified of flying and told them, "No, I'm not interested," and that's why he doesn't fly.
Oh, the actor. Oh, that's funny. You're like, oh, come on, man. Most of it's green screen anyway. Let's see. Was there anything else that we should clear up? I don't know. That seems pretty good. Okay. Yeah, we can get to the best part.
What's the biggest dope? Biggest nope.
I forgot these. I forgot these happened, and I should have had this written down. So now I gotta think about it.
Wow, you
Where are we
suck.
gonna? All right, so Kyle can go first. Is what we're doing.
I'll come up with this on the fly.
Oh no. Okay. Biggest dope is honestly, the Zeppelin dogfight scene for me is really fun. It's goofy, but it's super fun. Like it's
a cool set.
And also like I enjoyed the movie's determination to maintain that like wingmen are relevant. Like they don't, it's heavy handed and they don't do a great job of making a variety in the dogfights. But like one thing that comes across is there are still formations and they break off after one another, but they're always checking on each other. Like there's not the classic 1v1v1v1v1v1 and then we kill and then they don't do like the tournament thing that a lot of movies do where you just whittle your way through the 1v1s. And then biggest nope, James Franco.
What?
It's my biggest nope throughout this entire movie.
But he can scowl.
He doesn't do it
and
for me.
Smile. I wouldn't say James Franco's the biggest nope, but I would say his whole pursuit of Lucien was way too boring.
Oh boy.
Oh no, that's not my biggest nope. My biggest nope's how many different missions and it's starting to feel like a video game. My biggest dope would be, it's kind of hard to say, man. It's kind of bland. Not a lot to. I don't want to say I'll say the lion. I laughed at the lion being the mascot. I thought that was funny. All right, take us home, Samuel.
All right, let's see. Biggest dope. I like the shot of the Newport 17s coming out of the fog. It's definitely like a trailer shot. And I was like, all right, cool. They've got, this is cool. That was a cool shot. I also enjoyed, I think most of the dogfighting scenes are pretty good.
Yeah.
Whenever they're not like talking. If somebody's like, we're Knights of the Air or beware the hook, I was like, oh my God, please, can this movie end? However, a lot of the combat was like pretty good, actually. And it was fun to watch. I thought that was pretty good. Biggest nope. I mean, there's like I said earlier, historically, this movie is all like 5 inches to the left, 5 inches to the right. It's all just like a little bit off. It's all off by like a year, really. But I don't know. I think my biggest nope, I'm going to have to agree with you, Dustin, because this movie was 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so long, dude. Like, I was on a flight and I watched it and I was getting bored. I'm like in an airplane.
On a flight,
and I was getting bored. Yeah, I know. But exactly.
All right. Most excellent line.
I already gave mine earlier.
What was it?
Where he says, leave this aircraft and return to your chambers immediately. And he goes, yes, sir, and then
Yes,
flies
sir.
away.
Oh, yeah.
That's my favorite line.
What about you, Samuel?
Well, my favorite line is actually it's ripped from history. It's when they're at the funeral for I forgot his name. Cassidy, yeah. So what I'm gonna read actually is the actual lines that I ripped from this book here. But this is Jim McConnell, one of the American pilots. He died, but before he died, just like Cassidy, he left a note. And so it says, "My burial is of no import. Make it as easy as possible for yourselves. I have no religion and do not care for any service. If the omission would embarrass you, I presume I could stand the performance. Good luck to the rest of you. Goddamn Germany, and vive la France."
That's perfect.
And then one last aside, when a memorial service for McConnell was held at the American Church in Paris on April 2nd, 1917, according to one account, quote, 3 tearful mademoiselles attended, each one believing she was McConnell's fiancée. One would later marry another Lafayette Escadrille pilot.
Nice.
All right, Charles, your turn.
My most excellent line is when Cassidy is talking to Rollins, and they're talking about just like why Cassidy is so done with everything.
Mm-hmm.
And he's talking about the futility of the war, and he goes, someday it'll just end. Everyone will go home, get on with their lives. Tall grass will cover the battlefields, and all the pilots we've lost won't mean a damn thing. And I think it's one of the few like openly like powerful lines in the movie where it's like, this guy gets it. Like, this guy sees World War I for what it is, where there is no victory here. There's no winning. There's just surviving, because at some point we're all going to get tired of killing each other and we're just going to stop. And even though it's meta in the sense that obviously they knew that that's what actually happened, it is a powerful line because that's exactly what actually happened. It's like Europe just ran out of the ability to kill each other. And then it ended. So that's my favorite line.
There we go. Most excellent. Unlike this movie. 5 out of 10. 5 out of 10.
Okay. I actually agree with you. We have the same movie rating.
There
for
we
once.
go.
Yeah.
Podcast is over.
Does it hurt you that I rated this the same as The Northman, though?
Yes. This was the same as The Northman?
I gave The Northman a 5.
All right,
I remember right.
That might seem like a hot take, but I also didn't like The Northman. I was like,
thank you.
I was like, this is boring.
Anyway, Samuel, what's your number rating for this movie, not The Northman? Because we're not talking about that one now.
For some reason, I'm thinking I give it a 6, but I don't really know why I'm doing that.
Go with your gut.
Maybe I'm just really generous today. I'm gonna give it a 6.
There you go.
And then do we give it a history score?
Oh, please do.
History score like a 4 or a 5. Yeah,
that's valid. That's fair.
Still
better than Braveheart.
It is a movie that is set in World War One. They use World War One stuff all over the place.
It's set somehow in all of World War One, but it takes place over 3 months.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, hopefully we don't lose 42 million on this podcast. Might be out of the budget for me.
If I had 42 million, I would not be putting it into this podcast.
Well, I wouldn't have put it into this movie either, but
no, I'd have taken my money
somebody
back.
Did. All right, boys. Thanks for coming in and stopping by and hanging out.
Absolutely. This has been so much fun. Once again.
Lucy and Dad with the studio.
There we go. We'll just have a fly out outro. Or plane noise outro. I think, don't hold me to this, audience. I think this is our last episode before we do our first break. So this will be the end of Act 1 of Season 3. And so it's going to be probably about 4 weeks before we put out another episode. Chances are it took you an extra 4 weeks to get to this episode, so we've got a new one coming soon.
Merry Christmas, I guess. Like what?
At least, well, shoot, I don't know. I can't do the math on when this one comes out plus 4 weeks. So,
I guess Thanksgiving.
Yes, it should be about Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Happy Thanksgiving, guys.
And yeah, we'll be back for some more. But yeah, we are going to take a little break, and then season 3 will continue on.
A little breaky break.
Yep. All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.